Welcome to episode 85, Elizabeth Holmes, The Dramatic Rise and Fall of Theranos. This is an outline of episode 85. Elizabeth Holmes, the pedigree. She was born in 1984 in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. Her grandfather was a medical inventor. This is the picture of his grandfather, Christian R. Holmes. He was the head of the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine. In high school, she was a prodigy. She learned C++ and Chinese. At age 18, she started at Stanford University, where she studied chemical engineering. She was a president's scholar. She dropped out of Stanford at age 19 to pursue her dream, to revolutionize the medical testing industry.
So the question was, what was the process of dropping out of Stanford when I was 19 like? And I actually originally did not intend to drop out of Stanford, but I wasn't going to any classes and I was spending all of my time talking to VCs. I ended up living in the basement of a bunch of Stanford grads and started working from the basement of their house, and then finally convinced someone to give us, originally it was a bridge loan, and then went through the process of starting to build the company. The question was, as a 19-year-old, how do you go about the process of convincing people that you know what you're doing and that you can pull it off? I think the first piece is realizing that it's not necessarily about age. And people like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and the Google guys and Michael Dell and Larry Ellison and others have demonstrated that. I think it's about technology, it's about people, it's about the conviction and dedication that an entrepreneur has in going into it to make something work no matter what. And
The Theranos promise. One drop of blood instead of vials of blood.
She's 19 years old and starts this company. At that point in time, the company was not called Theranos. It was called RealTime Cures. They had raised almost $15 to $16 million.
From 2006 to 2013, Theranos operated in secrecy.
Starting in about 2013, when that stealth mode kind of emerged from its cocoon. So about 140 of these tests, starting in 2014, were under $10. And this is what the nanotainer looks like. Their theory, or their claim to fame, was one tiny drop changes everything. And again, it's a 1.29 centimeter container. How does it compare to other ones? Well, this is what it looks like, right? So if you're doing a blood draw,
it says on its website that it has the ability to run the full range, to use its language, of laboratory tests, and that suggests hundreds. Some people would say that suggests thousands of tests.
Another thing was this whole empowering of patients, so delivering the results right to you, not having to get screened out through a physician. This was really the patient empowerment movement was really emerging in 2005, 2006, 2007, and that continued with the Theranos promise. They basically wanted to make sure you had access to everything and you had transparency to everything before you actually underwent this test. Walgreens filed some partnerships with them. At one point, they had hundreds of centers that were about to be open.
She's a woman who runs a company, which is an anomaly among all the white men out there that are running these startups. She is actually working on a company that is perceived to be changing the world. And people were like, okay, this is perfect. This fits our little narrative that we've been putting out there for so long. And she was able to capture that. And I think that as a result, everyone stood behind her. And once
2013, 2014, Elizabeth Holmes becomes a rock star. She is a legitimate healthcare rock star. If you've not seen this face before, I'm surprised. You probably are on Facebook too much, so please get off and look at your industry. So Fortune, Inc., Wired, Forbes. Funny enough, one of the best articles that emerged about Elizabeth Holmes, one of the most flattering, was from the Wall Street Journal. At that point in time, there was also a private equity firm that committed almost $400 million to this company.
In 2015, Forbes magazine listed her net worth as $4.5 billion, making Elizabeth Holmes the richest woman self-made billionaire in the United States.
At that point in time, again, they were an $8 billion unicorn. Every FDA clears one of their tests.
In October 15, 2015, the Wall Street Journal published an investigative article on Theranos.
October 2015, something happened that really caused a huge downhill. And they've really been in defense mode ever since. Then this guy shows up. For months, John Kerry from the Wall Street Journal had been calling, and again, right? But he claims that for many months he was requesting an audience with Theranos. He was hearing rumblings in the back about how some of this technology wasn't valid. He received some whistleblower cases, some whistleblower information from some disgruntled ex-employees. There was a lot of smoke that was starting to emerge about this company that it back at us. So that was one of the themes that started emerging. The other thing that started emerging is that their knowledge of regulatory compliance and quality practices were fairly deficient. And that'll come to light here in a few minutes. But basically, at the end of 2014, and by that time the article was published, it was clear that there were some issues with the way that Theranos was conducting their tests. Now, they never disclosed publicly before their fundraising that they were doing those tests with non-Edison machines, with off-the-shelf machines. So you could imagine why that would be an issue, right? If you're claiming that you can do a specific test or you can do something new that the industry cannot do by extrapolating, by extracting one drop of blood, testing using a proprietary Edison tool, and basically coming up with results at a lower cost, yet what you're actually doing is extracting that blood, diluting some of the samples and sticking it into, and again, allegedly diluting some of the samples and sticking it into, off-the-shelf analyzers, then your technology isn't really validated. So that's what was emerging.
Soon, the FDA, CMS, and other government regulators got involved. Theranos was in big trouble.
So, as you can imagine, Theranos fired back, ton of back and forth. Studies were finally released by a lot of these labs that had been saying that Theranos' test data was not valid. One of the biggest difficulties is, so remember how I told you that most of their tests were not conducted on their Edison machines? So the ones that were conducted on their Edison machines had significant differences between those tests and tests that were done at typical laboratories or traditional laboratories, which would be a huge blow for this company. So CMS got involved, FDA, we haven't talked about FDA yet, but all these different agencies, New York Health Department got involved. A lot of these different agencies started basically coming up with independent inspections and reports about how Theranos' tests were invalid. So, more importantly, just this year in January 2016, CMS found significant quality deficiencies with several of their labs, and in fact, to the point where they're potentially revoking a lot of their tests so that they do not get Medicare coverage. Now, what happens is that when you have this phrase on your website, one tiny drop changes everything, and now it's really maybe because we're not sure. Things without. Or they could potentially do it with Edison. Edison was one way of many to get the samples. A lot of different redactions from their website that really came up, during this time frame.
Theranos, valued at $9 billion, came under scrutiny in 2015 after an investigation by the Wall Street Journal raised questions about whether the technology actually worked. Since January of this year, the company has failed inspections by federal investigators and violated several clinical standards. Elizabeth Holmes and her company are now facing a number of consumer and criminal investigations. But Holmes is now hoping she can stay afloat by offering investors extra shares if they promise not to sue her. That includes some of her own stake.
What have I learned today? In 2017, Elizabeth Holmes' net worth is down to close to zero. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and leave your comments and questions below. My next video will be Elizabeth Holmes' 8 Lessons of Dropout Self-Made Billionaire. Wishing everyone peace and prosperity.